Hi friends, welcome back to another episode of Generation Films. My name is Alan. In the last few days I've played the new Star War Squadrons video game. Now, normally I'm not a huge fan of EA games because they tend to be shallow in gameplay mechanics and design. I played the two new Battlefront games for two reasons: to relive famous Star Wars moments, and in the second game learn more about Star Wars lore through the single-player campaign. But as a huge supporter of the VR platform and how immersive it can be, I was really excited for Star Wars Squadrons release because it does have native support for VR. As of now, it's quite rare to see AAA titles on VR. Other than Half-Life Alyx, most of the games I play on the platform are low budget and usually focused on good mechanics and interesting ways to use the medium rather than creating beautiful and immersive worlds. And so I came into this game with very, very high expectations, and so today I want to talk about 10 things I learned while playing Star Wars Squadrons in VR. As a huge Star Wars nerd, I always speculated based on its design that the TIE Fighter would have massive blind spots. For any of you who drive a car, you know what I'm talking about. You see, the TIE Fighter is flanked by two massive solar panels that basically blocks anything coming at you from the sides, which actually doesn't even matter that much because the TIE Fighter only has one large forward windscreen. There is a tiny window in the back and a small viewport on the docking hatch up top, but they're basically useless in a tense dogfighting situation. Also, the TIE Fighter doesn't have some slick LCD screen which is connected to external cameras that can help you when you're docking in a Star Destroyer or docking up with a Gazanti-class cruiser. Now, in defense of the TIE Fighter's design, maybe having too many windows on your shieldless ship is a structural weakness, and so you wouldn't want to have too many viewports. Maybe in the early days of the Empire, when it dominated the galaxy, TIE Fighter pilots never expected enemies to come up from behind them and shoot at them. Maybe the TIE Fighters were always on the offensive, so only the forward viewing port is necessary. But from personal experience, when you're flying one of these things, you really don't know someone's behind your TIE Fighter until the laser bolts either hit you or go flying past your wing. But I do have to say, when you're flying around in open space, having blind spots on the side isn't all that bad. You kind of get used to flying like this pretty quickly, so it is doable. Now, the Rebel ships, on the other hand, have a much more generous cockpit view. The X-Wing Starfighter and A-Wing Interceptor both give you a clear view to the sides and above, and believe it or not, it's a huge advantage in combat situations. Now, when a TIE Fighter flies across the front of your ship, you can actually track its trajectory with your own eyes instead of being just locked into a forward view like you would without VR. It's probably one of the coolest aspects of playing Squadrons in VR and gives you the same type of field of view you would get in third-person mode without VR. Being able to turn your head around in your cockpit is a huge immersion factor bonus and really does make you feel connected to your ship. I found myself constantly glancing over my shoulder as my X-Wing started taking hits from the rear. You can even see your little astromech buddy as well. Now, this kind of generous view of the cockpit mirrors the Rebel Alliance's philosophy when it comes to how it fights the war. The wider FOV makes these ships more defensive in nature, whereas a TIE Fighter is kind of locked in with a forward vision and focused only on the attack. It should also be noted that the giant forward viewport on the TIE Fighter gives you a great forward view, including what's directly in front and below you. Most Rebel ships actually have a blind spot in that area because the area in front of the cockpit is usually blocked by the front of the ship. While that's not a problem when you're driving on the road, when you're flying in space, it presents just another blind spot. Now, in the beginning of the single-player campaign, you have an option to turn off the heads-up display. While in most games that does make things more immersive, here in Star Wars Squadrons, it's a much more natural kind of way to play the game as well. Instead of having floating icons everywhere on the screen, now everything from your missile count to your radar is placed on the dashboard of your fighter, and you don't really think even twice about it. What is interesting about having all of your information on your dash is that you start encountering the same issues you would when you're driving a car or riding a motorcycle in real life. So now you can either look at where you are going or at the wide array of information on your dash that you need to inform you on how your ship is doing. I constantly found myself scanning the radar and feeling nervous because I wasn't keeping my eyes on where I was going. At the same time, when flying through a narrow corridor or the wreckage of some ship, you couldn't really just look down and see if you had any more countermeasures or concussion missiles in your arsenal. This is another new challenge that VR gives you when you're This is a new challenge that the game presents to you when you're playing in VR, and I think that makes the game even better to play. No matter which side of the war you were on, I found myself extremely excited every time the campaign gave me a new ship to fly. And that wasn't just because each ship does handle a bit differently or has different sets of skills. It was more because all of the cockpits of each one of these ships is meticulously rendered for a 360-degree viewing. I had so many geek outs, whether it was jumping into the classic X-Wing for the first time or seeing the large interior of the TIE Reaper and wishing that one of my friends could jump into the co-pilot seat next to me and maybe manage the power systems or weapons. That would be a really incredible kind of addition. It's kind of like in Battlefield, how you used to have a guy jump into the gunner seat of your helicopter. So if you do play Squadrons in VR, you'll probably spend a pretty good amount of time just looking around in the interior of your ship. Now, one of the reasons why you still have to rely on your radar and scopes when playing in VR is that visibility is a bit limited because your gear can be limited. Now, this is an Oculus Rift, and it displays, I think, somewhere around 1080 to 1200 pixels per eye. This is probably kind of a mid-level VR system. There are better ones on the market right now, and there are a lot better ones coming out soon. While 1080 by 1200 pixels sounds pretty good, especially if you have it on a normal computer screen, when that screen is just a few inches from your face, it's just not sharp enough to see details off in the distance. Now, this is a temporary problem, but it is a problem right now at this stage with the hardware we have in VR. So it's going to be hard to see an enemy fighter without radar until they're relatively close and almost on top of you. Also, if you want to play the more graphically beautiful version of this game, it's probably going to be the one without the VR headset because your computer will be rendering a much smaller FOV if you're just playing with a screen. Now, I played this game with a gamepad. I didn't have a flight stick because it's relatively hard to find one on the market right now. I blame Microsoft Flight Simulator. But even then, if you want a good setup, it's going to cost you several hundreds of dollars. And as someone who doesn't really play flight simulators all that much, it didn't make sense for me. But what I have done before is play VR games with touch controls. One of the coolest VR experiences that I've had was playing No Man's Sky and using the touch controls to actually maneuver the flight stick around in-game. I'm really disappointed that Star Wars Squadrons doesn't allow for this option. It would have been really cool if the players could physically engage the hyperdrive lever, something I'll bet Star Wars fans have wanted to do since they first saw Han Solo do it in the Millennium Falcon. I hope that with future games, developers will look more into incorporating these touch controls into every aspect of the game. Now, not everyone has a stomach to play VR. When American Ben hopped on the sticks, he avoided making sharp turns or doing barrel rolls, which ultimately made him kind of a terrible pilot. But it's understandable if you have motion sickness. This can be a nausea-inducing game.
I can't even see where I'm going. I'm just so motion sick. Guys, take your drama maybe for playing this.
But as someone who also gets motion sick when doing various things, I do have to say that you are able to train your body to basically become more resilient to becoming sick while playing these types of games. I recommend playing a game like Star Wars Squadrons a little at a time, and whenever you don't feel well, take a long break if you do get motion sick. Eventually, you will develop a tolerance over time, and you'll be able to play the game hours at a time like I can. Is Squadrons a good game? Well, if you were to compare it to other VR games on the market, you'd probably say that the artwork, design, and even gameplay elements are pretty top-notch for a VR game. But as a normal space combat game, like most EA titles, it's a bit arcadey and shallow. There's a lot of things that they just kind of get wrong. The ships don't really break up the right way when they explode, and you can basically bounce off of Star Destroyers going at full speed if you really want to. If you don't mind that kind of stuff and you aren't coming from the more hardcore corner of space flight simulators, then this game should be fine for you. There's plenty of interesting Star Wars lore for the Star Wars fans as well, but personally, were this game not in VR, I probably wouldn't be nearly as excited to play it. But at the same time, this isn't a genre game that I'm particularly interested in, so take this short review I've just given you with a grain of salt. So that's basically what I've noticed after playing Star Wars Squadrons in VR. Let me know in the comment section below if you've noticed anything interesting about your own experience as well. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification button down below so you don't miss out on the rush of our awesome content. As usual, thanks for joining us. My name is Alan, reminding you that life is a movie and you are the protagonist.